Welcome to my backyard. It's a beautiful day, the sun's shining. Let's sharpen a kitchen knife. So, it's been a while. I know you're thinking, when's the new knife video coming out? Well, I've got this guy in the works, but to put it simply, we've had a few setbacks, so it'll be a few more weeks before this is ready. So we've got our tub here. I was trying to, as much as possible, kind of approximate like the Japanese videos where they're over the bucket, you know. They're like kneeling on the stone and they're but basically I find any stone will work for this process. People ask what to get, and people are snobs about like, oh, you gotta get the fancy Japanese stone that costs like $400 each. This is just a simple 2-side sharpening stone, which most people will have, so I'm going to use that for the video. Now you can use a steel, like one of those ceramic rods. The only issue with that is if you only use that, you can eventually end up recurving the blade or the edge if you're not consistent in how you use it. So I do think it is good to go to a stone every so often and straighten everything out. So as to start, what I do is I establish my grip. So I hold the blade firmly and I put my finger near the heel of the blade, and then I press down. This tension helps prevent it from falling down, and if it falls and because you're pushing down and you do a stroke, you'll end up scratching the blade. So you want to try to avoid doing that, especially if you're selling them. So finger here, establish tension, and you're going to establish your angle. Now if this is a bought knife, you're going to have to figure out your angle. I made this knife, I sharpened it myself, I roughly know what the angle is, and I go more by feel than any established angle. A lot of people have those like gizmos where you run it down something and there's a guide that holds the angle perfect and all that. I haven't had good luck with that. I've had the most success with just a good old-fashioned whetstone. So let's get started. So we've established that the knife is dull, and the way you do that is you take your 3 fingers and your thumb and you just gently touch the edge and you feel the teeth. Now the thing you're going to run into as you start to do this is, as it gets really sharp, you'll stop feeling the teeth, because what those are is they're the little serrations from the grit in the stone, and they'll get finer and finer as the blade gets sharper. So you'll feel the finer and finer edge until suddenly you won't. And at that point, you're going to have to make a judgment call and test it to see if it's actually sharp. Because sometimes you're dulling the blade because you're doing it wrong, and sometimes you have achieved razor sharp, at which point the edge will become smooth. So you're just going to work in nice, long, even strokes to start. Later on, you can, if one area is duller than the rest, you can focus on that area. But just to start, you can do nice long strokes, getting the entire edge. And you're going to be at a fairly shallow angle. If this edge was chipped or damaged in some way, I would be at a higher angle because I would be just working it back. But when you're sharpening it, you are at a fairly shallow angle, especially on a kitchen knife. And you want it to be thin and sharp. Just letting the stone do the work, rocking your body back and forth, not pushing too hard. So I don't know if you'll be able to see this on video, but the tip of this knife has folded a little bit. That was because this is a very fine, thin knife, and I used it to cut a brownie once, and it met glass and it lost. So just a very little tip is damaged. So I am going to go to the stone at a higher angle, and I'm just going to walk that back a little bit to re-establish the point. Okay, that's fixed. If you can't see that, but I got it. So now that we have walked that back, we can reestablish that roughly 20-degree angle. Okay, so obviously you're not here with me, so you can't feel this. But if you run your hand down the side of the blade, you will feel almost a fuzzy, like a line. That is when a steel has reached, or the edge has reached its apex, and in pushing on it to sharpen it, it has folded over. That's what that is. And that's how you know you have achieved a point. It is now sharp. So everything we're doing after this point is to now eliminate that burr that you have created so that you are left with a crisp edge. Now this is really a hand feel thing. This is a very analog skill. I haven't found that any of those fancy jigs or tools that lets you hold it at a specific angle has really beaten the whetstone for me. I like to touch this, I like to feel this. I find that is really how I like to identify when a blade is sharp, is really by feel. Okay, so now that we have our burr, what we're going to do is we're going to work on the other side, and we're going to knock it off. And we're going to keep doing this until the burr is on the other side, because we want to make sure that the edge is symmetrical. Now when I switch sides, it's the same thing as with my finger. It's the same thing, except instead of my index finger, it's my thumb pushing down. So you see, hold it like that, and I apply force that way. Making sure that we maintain our angle on the stone. Okay. So I've got the burr here and here. I need a little bit more on the edge. So we just focus on there for a minute. Now while you can focus on individual spots, you don't want to just go back and forth necessarily, because you can end up digging into the edge of the stone a little and messing up your edge. Now if the stone is properly dressed, that shouldn't happen, but I don't know what you're working with and I don't know your skill level, so I always try and make sure that I'm moving back and forth a little bit, even if I'm focusing on one area. I want to make sure that it's gliding along with the edge and we're not just working one spot too much. Okay, I have the burr all the way around. So now what we're going to do is we're going to strop it with the stone. So we're going to work slowly back 3 times. I like to do 3 times usually. And we're going to go the other way, knocking off that burr 3 times. And then 2 times. And then 1 time. Making sure we're even. Now there should be no burr remaining that I can feel, no? Okay. Wash it off. With anything that's polished like this, I always like to use water to clean it. You don't want to wipe abrasives because they'll scratch. So anytime any abrasive material is on a polished surface, I like to take water and float it off. Same thing if you're working with acrylic, whatever. Just don't rub it. Car paint, you know, anything like that. So now we go to the polished side, and now we're just going to, in the same way as with sanding or polishing, we're just going to refine the scratches on the edge and polish the surface. So with the polished side, you're not going to feel the burr as clearly. You can feel it, but it's more of a delicate touch kind of thing. It's going to be a little hard to identify. More so with these polishing grits, you're going to be feeling the edge, and you're going to be determining when it's starting to get a little scary. It's something you can kind of innately find, is when steel is starting to get, you're in danger of being cut. So once you get there, you're going to strop it. Maintaining your angle, you're going to go backwards. And that is going to eliminate any remaining burr. And refine the edge. Now when you do this, you want to make sure that you don't roll the blade. You want to drag it back consistently in the same plane as you did when you were sharpening it, or when you were going forward. That is sharp. Now you can stop there. It's sharp, it'll cut. But if you want to go the extra mile and you really want, one of those like YouTube shorts, lay the tomato down and cut it freestanding. If you want to do that, what you want to do is you want to strop it. So I take some green polishing compound and I put it on my very DIY leather strop here. Made in Ukraine. Interesting. Now hold this out, and you're going to drive the knife back at a slightly steeper angle than you were when you were sharpening it. And you're just going to refine that edge, knocking off any remaining burr and polishing the steel. Do this, I don't know, 10 times. However much you feel. If it needs a little more, do a little more. Now see, we're about to see how sharp that is, because it feels, it's not spiky anymore. It doesn't feel super sharp, but I think it is. So the test, does it shave? Yes, it does. Now a knife is, in my opinion, a knife is sharp when it not only shaves, but when you can just touch it to your hair and it'll just pop off like that. I'm just touching it and it's just popping. That is sharp. That is very sharp. Paper test. I'm going to do this inside. So now that you've got a really sharp knife, the thing about a really sharp knife is if it's carbon steel, what I'll sometimes do is I will then pass it back over a steel and actually take the edge to a lower grit. Now why do I do that? Because on carbon steel, by its very nature, it will oxidize easily. So the second you cut like an onion with this thing, it'll start to go dull because it'll oxidize that very thin edge. And you'll feel like it lasts a very short time before it's dull again. So once that happens, it's still thin, it's still close to sharp, just pass it a few times over a sharpening stone or over a steel. You can even strop it. I can find that's very effective. And you'll restore 85% of your edge and it'll be good to go again. And that'll be a much more durable edge. Not quite as sharp, but it'll last a much longer time. So if you don't like to sharpen your knives a lot, I would do this, and then I would just pass it just quickly over a lower grit stone. So I would just pass it quickly over a sharpening stone or a lower grit stone, and that will be a long-lasting, robust edge that you can rely on for a while. Nothing wrong with making it razor sharp. It's awesome, it's fun. You can post videos of how your knife can shave your hand, but if it's carbon steel, it won't last very long because it'll oxidize. Now, if it's a stainless steel knife, I would take it to that razor sharp thin edge, because it will not oxidize and it will last longer before it goes dull. There's actually a misnomer with carbon steel blades versus stainless. People think they're sharper. How that generally works is if it's a good stainless, you can absolutely sharpen it, but it's more resistant to abrasion, so it's harder to get that fine edge, but it'll last longer. Whereas with a carbon steel knife, you can sharpen them in a pinch, but they won't last quite as long. That's kind of the trade-off that you get with most common stainless steels and carbon steels. There's a million different steels in the world, so your mileage may vary, but that is a general rule. Simple carbon steel, easier to sharpen, won't last as long. Stainless steel, take a little harder to sharpen, edge will last a little bit longer because it won't oxidize on you.